Hi everyone, this is Tuplex. Welcome back. It's time to wrap up the 2.5K SPM portion of the series. So today I'm going to discuss results, and then I'll do a base tour and explain some of the design concepts that we've been using for anyone who hasn't been following along with the whole series. All right, so as you can see, we're using a grid-based layout. So we have two lanes, or one lane in each direction, 2 lanes total. Each grid section is 8 power poles in length, and we are using 4/8 trains throughout the base. All the trains are the same length, with a couple of minor exceptions. For example, the train that delivers fuel cells to the reactors is a 1/1 train. But pretty much everything involved with mass production is a 4/8 train. The rail design is from Alexi. Alexi is the guy that inspired me to build this base in the first place. He built one similar to this in version 16. And I just really liked the design, and I wanted to try to build something like it myself. So that's what we've got here. So I've got, my grid is 7x7. So I've got 49 grid sections total. I've got I've got 2 empty ones that haven't been used. And a lot of the grid squares you can see are occupied by train depots. And we'll get into that in a little bit as we go through this. And then down here, this is where my starter base was. Once we got the base expanded, I essentially eliminated the starter base and just replaced it with a mall. So I've got a pretty basic mall here. Lots of logistics storage, and then this is my personal train that I use to get around the base. These are the refueling stations for the trains. All the trains are running on uranium fuel, which gives them the best acceleration possible, which I like having, especially for such large trains. It really helps to have the acceleration for them to get out of the way quickly. Okay, so let's start with mining. And then we'll go through the rest of the supply chain. All right, so in some cases, well, in all cases, I've created ore patches with Creative Mod. And I did that just because I didn't want to have to constantly be making new ore setups. Okay, so I created these ore patches. These are in the same position that there were originally regular ore patches. And then I removed them and I replaced them with these ore patches where each tile has 10 million ore on it. As you can see, I'm doing direct drilling into the train. So I'm using speed modules and beacons with speed modules so that the train can fill quickly. And as you can see, once you get to fairly high levels of mining productivity, the train does fill pretty fast. I don't think we're filling. Yeah, we're not filling as quickly as we could with 6 inserters per wagon or 12 inserters per wagon, but we're getting close. And each time I get another level of mining productivity, it gets even a little bit faster. Okay, so like this train that I've been hovering over in the time that I've been talking about it here, it's nearly full. Let's see, 14, 15, 16. There we go. All right, so I've got several resource patches. Here I've got copper and coal. Over here I've got iron. I've got more iron up here. Now in this case I didn't remove all of the original ore patch, but I did add in the 10 million ore patch on top of it. I've got iron mining up here. And I've got copper mining here, and then stone. I'm getting stone down here. Okay, here I have another patch of stone that I'm using just to make landfill. And then this is my uranium patch. This is the same patch that I started the game with. And over here I'm making enough to power the 128 reactors that I've got. Let's take a quick look at power. My power setup consists of these arrays of 8 reactors. And I couldn't even tell you how many turbines I've got on each one of these, but each one of these arrays makes 1.1 gigawatts. Okay, so, and then I fit 6 of those arrays in a grid cell. This was the original setup. So I've got 3 here. I've got 6 there, another 6 here, and another 6 here. And those are all fed by trains. So the train comes here, it loads fuel cells, it empties spent fuel cells, and I have 2 of those trains that shuttle around, taking care of wherever the fuel cells are needed or wherever empty fuel cells need to be picked up. So, and these stations will enable themselves when either they need more empty fuel cells or they have some that need to be picked up, empty ones that need to be picked up. Oops. Okay. From the mining, we go into these depots. I'm using TSM to manage the trains. So the way that works is you set up priorities. So every train has a similar schedule where it goes to wherever it picks up the resource, and then it goes to a depot. And then TSM will automatically take a train from the depot and send it to a requester station whenever that particular item is needed. So I've got depots for copper. Actually, I have 2 depots for copper ore, 2 depots for iron ore. The other one's over there. Lots of trains, as you can see. Actually, I haven't even counted how many total trains I have running, but it's quite a lot. However many that is. Probably a couple hundred. How do I make this go away? There we go. I'll leave the train stations on. Okay, and then when we get to smelting, this is where we get into one of the guiding principles of this base is that everything is made in 8 parallel independent columns. Okay, so each cargo wagon will unload, the ingredients will get processed, and then the final product goes into a single cargo wagon. Right, so that's why I say we have 8. So in this smelting example, I've got 8 smelting columns, and each one operates independently of the others. Each column has its own supply and its own output. And the entire factory is set up that way. So every production cell that we're going to look at is set up into 8 independent columns. All right, so this is copper smelting. So we get 2 not quite full copper ore belts going in, and we get 2 full blue belts coming out, and then we load onto opposite sides of the train. So that's all the basic smelting is done that way. Steel is similar, but in steel, I didn't have enough room to do 8 columns, so I made 16. But at the end, the 2 columns, each pair of columns joins together, right? And I have 2 belts from each wagon. So in this case, I have like 8 columns that are 2 wide, right? Doing direct insertion. Using productivity modules with speed beacons everywhere I can. All right, so in the case of steel, we're bringing ore in and we get steel out. And then I have a dedicated depot for steel. So I've got 3 of those. For green circuits, I'm doing the smelting on site, you could say. So I've got 3 big green circuit setups, as you can see. Number 3 seems, or what is this? Number 2. Number 2 seems to be a lot busier than the other ones for some reason. Got 4 trains there. I've got 3 trains on number 1 and 3 trains on number 3. All right, so that's 10 total. That's probably why 2 is busier, because it's got 1 more train. But anyway, I unload iron ore, I unload copper ore. That gets smelted. And then I get belts of iron and belts of copper coming out. I have 2 belts here because I need a little bit more than a single belt can carry. As you can see, sometimes it slows down a bit while the trains are loading, but in any case, plates go in, and then I've got 16 blue belts of circuits coming out and loading these chests. Okay, I have a dedicated module factory as well, where I just bring in copper plate, iron plate, and plastic, and then I make all the and sulfuric acid, and then I make all the circuits. I make green circuits, red circuits, and blue circuits on site, and that feeds into these module assembly arrays. I can make, 15. I can make 15 level 3 modules per minute, and I've been doing that pretty much the whole time. So we can see here I've got 7.5K of each module. We'll be using those later on when I expand again. Refineries. So I'm loading oil over here, and water is being managed by train as well. So up here I've got a depot where I've got trains with water, I've got trains with crude oil, my acid, my batteries. So the refineries take in trains with water and trains with crude oil. And then we go into the advanced processing. We make lubricant, pick up lubricant. We crack any remaining heavy oil into light, and then light oil fills these tanks. The light oil is moved by train for making rocket fuel, and then whatever's left over gets cracked into petroleum down here. Okay, so I've got 2 refineries, and they're both identical. And those trains load extremely fast. Those in turn will feed plastic, where I'm bringing in coal as well as the petroleum, making 16 belts of plastic at a time. Red circuits. Okay, I'm bringing in greens, I'm bringing in plastic, and I'm bringing in copper plate. I'm doing direct insertion of the copper wires in this case, and getting 8 nearly full blue belts of red circuits coming out. Blue circuits, I bring in the green, the red, 2 trains of green in this case because they get consumed fairly quickly, as well as the acid. And then in this case, I've got 8 belts coming out because I need to keep each column separate, but in this case, we're using less than half a belt, but that's enough to keep things running. Let's take a look at science production. All right, red science, pretty easy. 1 machine making gears on each column that goes into 3 making the science packs. That's obviously the easiest of them all. And that goes up to get loaded there. Green science is, here it is. Slightly more complicated. In this case, I bring in iron plates and green circuits, and then I make gears, I make inserters, I make belts. And again, that feeds into 3 machines for each column. And like I said, each column is Each column is independent, right? So each column gets its own supply of iron and green circuits. The advantage of doing these independent parallel factories like this is you don't have to use balancers. So you will see throughout the base, I don't have any belt balancers anywhere. The most you might see me use would be like a lane balancer, which we'll see, you know, where I'll take an output belt and I'll balance it just so it gets on both sides of the belt. But I don't need any belt balancers with this design, and that's one of the things I love about it. It makes it very simple because the design of the base in this case is inherently balanced, right? You get one cargo wagon in and you get one cargo wagon out, and you keep it that way everywhere throughout the base, and it stays balanced by itself. You don't have to worry about balancing every single input and output. Saves a lot of space, saves a lot of time, saves UPS. As you can see, we're running at pretty close to 60 UPS without issue, making 2,500 science packs a minute, which I will prove to you shortly. Yeah, so that's green science. I also am making military science, even though I turned off biters a long time ago. The base is capable of producing military science, which it does here. This is a little more complicated, right? We make stone brick from stone. We turn that into walls. We make the grenades. We make the ammo. And then we make the science packs. So even though I'm not using military science packs right now, the base is capable of doing 2,500 a minute, including military science, if needed. So if we decided to turn biters back on, we could do military research and maintain our production rate. Blue science is, I don't know, fairly simple. We just take 3 ingredients in. The engines I am making over here. All right, so I have a dedicated unit making both engine types. So I bring in iron, steel, green circuits, and lubricant. And then I make the standard engine units. Those go onto one side of the belt. And then I make the electric engines. Those go onto the other side of the belt. And then they come up here where I split them off so that they can be picked up by 2 separate trains. I don't have a depot for these because these each only go to one destination. So regular engines go to blue science and electric engines go to yellow science. So I don't need a depot for that since there's no choice to be made about where they go. And then sulfur, acid, and batteries are all being made in the same place. So I bring in water, petroleum, iron, and copper. I make the sulfur and the acid kind of at the same time here. And then I make batteries as well. Again, I'm sharing a belt here because I need less than half a belt for each of these items, and then I split it up here. So we load the sulfur here, and we load the batteries there. I have some extra chests that I'm not using, and then the sulfuric acid gets loaded there. And those do go to depots. That depot is up here. Okay, I've got my acid, my batteries. The sulfur, actually I think the sulfur, there's no depot for sulfur since that only goes to one place. So that gets us up to blue for purple science. Right, here's an example of where I'm using some lane balancers just to try to keep the belts full here as well. This was a bit of a challenge. Keeping the belts full. So here again, I'm making stone brick from stone, and then the stone continues up to be turned into rails. I have pretty much almost a full blue belt of rail being made. Here I make the electric furnaces and the productivity modules, and then those 3 ingredients go up here to make the science packs. Okay, and then utility science. This one has a lot of inputs. I think this one has the most inputs out of any of them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I'm bringing in engines, batteries, green circuits, steel, blue circuits, and low density structures. So this was a bit of a challenge to set up as well. So we make the flying robot frames and then bring up the blue circuits and the low density structures to make the science packs. Okay, speaking of low density structures, I make those over here. Copper, plastic, and steel. In this case, I added a second train of copper so that we can make sure we're getting enough coming in. Right, output here is a little bit unbalanced. As you can see, this last chest always seems to stay filled while the other one's empty. That's just inherent to the way that the machines want to pull items from the belt. It often ends up with one side being fully loaded and the other one not. So here I had to bring in 3 belts. I had to use some splitters here, not to balance, but just to make sure that the belt that I'm using is always as full as possible. Right, and then those low density structures come up here. I decided to share the belt with steel on the output side. So I use filter inserters to pull the low density structures off of the belt and put into the train. Yeah, rocket fuel. Pretty simple build here. It only needs light oil coming in. And then I directly insert the solid fuel into the assembly machine to make the rocket fuel. That worked out pretty well. Made the build fairly simple. And then I just have a single belt coming out with the rocket fuel. And then I'm also bringing rocket fuel. No, I'm not. Sorry, I misspoke. For the train fuel, I'm making the rocket fuel in the starter base with the refinery that I started the game with. So that's where I make all the fuel for the trains. And then I have these 2 refueling stops. That's one of the things I like about about TSM, is that it'll automatically send the trains to the fuel stop whenever they need fuel, so you don't have to worry about refueling. Okay, and then rocket control units. Pretty simple build there. We just take the 3 different types of circuits and run them up on belts. We make speed modules, and then speed modules and blue circuits go on a shared belt to make the rocket control units. All right, and then finally, this is where we are launching the rockets. So, keeping with our design concept, I've got 8 silos. In order to get 2,500 science packs per minute, I need to launch all 8 rockets every 3.2 minutes. Now, all the science builds that I have, they can all make a little bit more than 2,500 per minute. Just because, you need to round up the number of machines per column. So here, for example, let's say I needed 3.1 machines. Well, I need to make 4 machines to get at least 3.1, which means I can produce more than 2,500. So I'm using the rocket launches as a way to pace the base. So 2,500 per minute on average is exactly what I'm getting out of these rocket silos, which we can see on our production graph. Right, so if we look at 10 minutes, for example, my labs can consume 2,600 per minute. And then I'll start to run out of space science, it'll drop down, and then it'll go back up when I get the next launch. But it averages out to 2,500 a minute. Let's watch a launch. Which will come when my counter gets to 100. right? So the way that I control the speed here is with a timer. We'll go over there in a moment so I can show you how I set that up. But I set this timer so that it'll only insert a satellite once every 3.2 minutes. And that's how I control the pace of production for the entire base and limit it to 2,500. Boom. And then the timer starts over. So this is showing what the percentage that we're at, what percent of the total time has elapsed. Okay, so we launch our 8 rockets. And then the science packs come out, and then those get taken over to the labs. All right, and here's where we're making satellites. This was probably the most difficult train station to put together, since I have 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I have 9 ingredients that I'm bringing in. It was a bit of a challenge to put together and to get all the belts run and everything. But so all of this is dedicated to making the satellites. I have 1 satellite in the chest. Right, the chest is limited. Well, let's go up there and I'll show you. It'll be easier to show you. We'll hop in my train and we'll go up there. I'll go park it there. That'll kind of give you a chance to get a sense of the scale of the base as well as we travel through it. I'm using a radar mod to increase the range of radars, because the vanilla radar doesn't have enough range to completely cover one of my grid cells. So rather than having radar peppered all over the base, I decided to use a mod. It increases the range and the power consumption, and that way I can have visibility of the entire base without having to have hundreds of radar everywhere. Okay, so I've got 1 satellite loaded, and then this chest is wired to this inserter. So I'll only put out another satellite when that one gets used. That way I just essentially make 1 satellite at a time. Right, I've got 1 in the chamber and then 1 ready to go. And then this is my timer circuit. Right, so it counts to 11,520 ticks, which is 3.2 minutes when you're running at 60 UPS. And then every time the timer resets, it sends a green signal to these inserters, which put the satellite in the silo, and it'll auto launch as soon as it gets a satellite. And as you can see, I've launched 2,032 rockets so far. It's about to become 2,040. $99. And there we go. I should probably have it count down from 99. That might be more cool. Okay, now this display, this is just a blueprint that I found on the web and copied. I don't even remember where I got it from, but you feed it a number. You feed a number to this pole, and it'll split it into digits and everything. So what I'm doing here is I'm taking my timer signal, which is counting up to 11,520. I multiply it by 100, and then I divide it by 11,520, and that's how I get the percentage to display rather than the raw number. Okay, let's head over to the labs, which is where I guess our final product is made. that final product being research. Right, that's really the purpose of it, is to make all these science packs so you can do research into mining productivity, so you make your base run faster and faster all the time, or at least more efficiently all the time. Okay, so I've got 100 and a little over 100 labs. I don't remember exactly how many, but so each of the science packs arrives by train. They get fed onto, eventually onto 4 different belts. Since I've got 7 science packs, I need at least 4 belts to carry them all, unless I do sushi. And then they run up and get fed into each of the labs. I put a circuit, since I have 4 belts coming in, it makes it difficult to, the 2 outside belts are easy enough to load into the labs. The 2 inside belts are a little bit more difficult because I have to first pull off of the belt and then go into the lab. So what I did is I had them going into a chest, and then I built a little circuit that just limits the amount that I can have of each of those 4 science packs in the chest to 10, or at least, I get 12 because of the stack size limitations. So whenever we need more of any of those science packs, these filter inserters will get turned on, and they'll be able to insert whatever science pack is needed. So that's how I keep all the labs fed. All right, so again, if we look at our production and consumption, and again, to see how my base is doing for science packs, I find it more useful to look at the consumption side. Because if you look at production, they can all produce at different rates depending on what time period you're looking at, right? And they're somewhat inconsistent, but the consumption stays fairly constant. Right. Now, if you look at the 10-hour window, it's a little bit less than 2.5 because I didn't really get everything tuned and working well until about 6.5 hours ago. But you can see for the last 6.5 hours, we've been sustaining 2,500 a minute with no problem. This little blip at about 5.5 hours ago, that's when I did some military production. I was doing like follower robot count and a few other things like that, artillery range, and those caused production science to drop, but still the overall consumption rate was 2,500 per minute, right? And I said previously that I was going to let it run at that rate for 10 hours, but again, it's already been well over 6 hours, and I don't see anything that will stand in the way of this continuing for another 4 hours at the same speed, right? I'm not running out of resources. I've got enough power. When I first got the base running at full speed, I had a traffic issue over here that I had to fix. I had some trains get into a deadlock because I was missing a signal. But since I fixed that, everything has been working just fine. I did have to add another copper smelter from my original layout, which is why I've got 1 copper smelter here and the other 2 there. I thought I would be okay with 2, but actually I needed 3. But yeah, aside from that, everything's running good. And it has been for a long time. So I'm pretty much done with this. Now, my plan from here was, rather than starting a new series, to continue working with this save game and build another base that can make 10,000 a minute to give myself a little more challenge. And maybe more than a little more challenge. I'm still working through some of the details of that in my head. I definitely want to keep the same parallel factory concept, but I'm thinking that at that scale, I think I might want to use bigger trains. So rather than having 4/8 trains, I might want to do like 8/16 trains, or 4/8, 4/8, or maybe even bigger than that. But if I do bigger trains, then I need bigger grid sections too, so that the trains can fit in there into the stackers and everything. So again, I'm still kind of going through some of those details in my head, and once I figure out what I want to do and how I want to do it, I'll start making more videos. If I do end up doing that, then I will leave this base running, because I'm still going to need the mall. I'm still going to need a lot of modules, which I'm making here. So my plan would be to leave this running and then build a 10,000 SPM base somewhere close by, but in a separate grid. And then have this base and that base running. So essentially the save game would end up being 12,500 science per minute, assuming my UPS doesn't get too bad. Now we can see now I'm running at about 56, 57 UPS. The mods themselves are not taking up too much resource. So I think I'm doing okay. Yeah, see, and then it occasionally goes back up close to 60. So really I haven't had any game performance issues building the base to this size, and that's another reason why I wanted to build bigger, because this is the largest base I've built so far, and I still have never, you read a lot about, and you see YouTube videos and stuff about people making large bases, and they're really heavily focused on UPS optimization to keep the game from slowing down. But I have to say that in my experience, I've never had a problem with UPS at all. Even in this base, I'm using nuclear power, and it's fairly large, and I'm still able to run at 60 UPS, which says a lot about the design of the game. They're continually improving the game and making it run more efficiently, and that helps a lot. Part of the reason that UPS is not impacted more is the fact that I don't have lots of balancers everywhere, because all those splitters require calculations to be made. So I think I'm going to try for 10,000 next. Bigger grids, bigger trains. I'll probably do 4 lanes instead of 2 to help traffic. But, theoretically, if I quadruple the output of the base and double the size of the trains, then I should have about twice as much traffic. Now, 4 lanes doesn't actually give you twice as much throughput as 2 lanes does. It doesn't scale that way, because adding more lanes, you still have some efficiencies, especially at your junctions and stuff. So doubling the number of lanes does not necessarily double your throughput of your train system, but it does increase the throughput. But that's what I'm thinking right now. It'll probably be, I'm going to take a little break before I get back into it. So until then, if you all have any comments, suggestions on how you think the base should be laid out or designed, please let me know. I think I'll continue to make some of my own ore patches, although I've got such a high, my mining productivity now is 450%. Maybe I might be able to use the ore patches that are already out there. They should last a fairly long time, because with a 450% productivity bonus, then this 71 million iron ore actually becomes 300 and something million, because I'm getting 4.5. I'm getting 4.5 ore for free for every one that I take out of the ground, right? So maybe I won't need to make my own ore patches like I've done in this base. But it has been nice, especially since I'm loading directly into the trains. It helps a lot that I'm able to make nice, neat, rectangular ore patches that fit exactly where I want my trains to go. Otherwise, I end up with, if I occupy a patch like this, for example, I might have to have trains in different positions and stuff, but it's not a big problem. But yeah, maybe we'll try it using the natural ore patches, and then if it gets to be a problem, I can always create my own later. That's not a big issue. Okay, well, thanks a lot for watching, everybody. Appreciate all the support. I've gotten lots of great comments, a lot of helpful feedback, a lot of funny comments and good suggestions, and a lot of appreciation too from those of you who have enjoyed the series, and that always makes me feel good. So I appreciate all the comments and suggestions and everything, and I will see you all again soon. Take care. Bye-bye.